Hello, this is what I'm growing in my 8-foot by 4-foot polycarbonate greenhouse here at Homegrown Veg in the United Kingdom. We have tomato plants down each side of the greenhouse, and we have a couple of cucumber plants growing at the far end of the greenhouse. I'm growing in buckets and bags this year, and this is a first for me, and I'm conducting a very small trial to see which is best: grow in buckets, grow in bags, grow vegetables in buckets, grow vegetables in bags. And at the far end of the greenhouse there is a cucumber growing in a bucket and a cucumber growing in a bag, and pegged to the bottom of those two plants, pegged to the bucket and pegged to the bag, is a yogurt pot that I'm using as a pebbleometer. And each time I take a cucumber, I drop a pebble into the pebbleometer, and at the end of the season we'll turn out the pebbleometers and see which of those two cucumber plants has delivered the most cucumbers. I was going to do that with the tomatoes as well, but I've realised it's just, well, I'll probably lose the will to live if I tried to do it. There's just so many tomatoes, and particularly on the cherry variety, the cherry tomato varieties. Some of these trusses have 20 or 30 tomatoes on them, and there's maybe 6 or 7 trusses on a plant. And I'd either run out of pebbles or the pebbleometers would overflow. So I'll just make a judgment on that and tell you which I think's best, if in fact one is better than the other in terms of how the plants grow and what they deliver, either in a bucket or in a bag. Right, let's take a closer look at the varieties we've got growing in the greenhouse this year. This is a variety called Sun Gold. It's got a great reputation for taste. It's a first for me. I've never grown Sun Gold before, and I was taken aback by the actual number of tomatoes on each truss, and that's what put me off the pebbleometers for tomatoes. There's just so many tomatoes on each truss, and this goes right up to the underside of the roof. And both of these tomatoes have been pinched out now. The one growing in the bucket and the one growing in the bag. So they're about the same size, and they look as though they have probably the same amount of tomatoes developing on them. So that looks about even Stevens at this point, but let's get to the end of the growing season before we make that judgment. Right, let's swing across the greenhouse. Saves me adjusting the focus on this camera, and have a look at the tomatoes nearest to camera on this side. Okay, this is one of those beefsteak tomatoes, I think. It's called Heinz 1350. They really are big tomatoes, these, and I'm actually having problems keeping them on the plant. They're so big, and the trusses are starting to break, and I'm having to support them with string. I've even got sellotape on some of them I need to work out how to keep these big tomatoes on the plant until they actually ripen. But Heinz 1350, both plants, one in the bucket, one in the bag, they've both reached the underside of the roof together and they're both pinched out, and they look as though they're probably going to deliver a similar amount of fruit. Right, let's go down the greenhouse one from that. This is a tomato called Shirley. Bottom trusses are starting to produce ripe tomatoes now. Again, Shirley in the bag, Shirley in the bucket. I can't differentiate between the two in terms of the size of the fruit and the number being produced. That looks as though that will eventually end up a draw. Both these plants have reached the underside of the roof, and both of these plants have been pinched out. And before I go back indoors, I'm going to be harvesting some of these tomatoes, and particularly those Shirleys there coming off. Right, let's get across the other side. Okay, the tomato you're looking at now in the middle of your screen, not the big one on the greenhouse floor, to the left of that and back towards you, that's Crimson Crush. Now, Crimson Crush has a reputation of being a blight resistant tomato, but I wouldn't know if it's blight resistant or not. You wouldn't know unless all your other tomatoes got blight, and it didn't get blight. But that's Crimson Crush. Both those plants, the one in the bucket, the one in the bag, both up the underside of the roof and pinched out, and both looking good and producing some fine tomatoes. Right, while we're on this side, and while you can see that big tomato lying on the floor of the greenhouse, the two tomatoes in the corner next to the cucumbers are Big Daddy. I've never grown this tomato before, and I've got to say, that looks a big tomato. It really does. And herein lies the problem. They're just so big, they easily come off the plant. You don't have to touch them too hard when you're in the greenhouse, and they're on the ground. If you get some wind blowing in through an open door and the trusses start swaying, you can quite easily finish up with tomatoes on the ground. So I really need to think of a better way of keeping these big tomatoes, particularly on the plant, until they ripen. Hold on. I've just had a eureka moment. Thinking about how I'm going to support those big tomatoes, I've just had a eureka moment. I don't know if this will work. It'll certainly bring a smile to your face when I show you it. It most definitely will. But anyway, let's go across the greenhouse to the very last one, and that's the one in the far corner. And again, it's a cherry tomato, and it's called Cerise, and it's just got a lot of tomatoes on it, both plants, and they're both up to the roof at the moment. Right, I'm going to nip into the greenhouse now and pick these tomatoes, so I'll need to move this camera out of the way. There's no room really to swing a cat in these small greenhouses, so you're not going to see me pick these tomatoes. I'll take them indoors, we'll have another look at them, and I'll tell you about that eureka moment. This is Shirley. This is Sun Gold. This is Crimson Crush. This is Cerise. This is Heinz 1350. And this is Big Daddy. I'm going to put Big Daddy on the scales and let you just get an appreciation of how big this tomato is. And then I'm going to show you that eureka moment that I've just had out of the greenhouse. Okay, let's see what Big Daddy weighs in at. It's Big Daddy on the palm of my hand. He's a big one. Let's see what he weighs in at. Wow, 3/4 pound. So it's no wonder these guys are falling off trusses, is it? It's no wonder they're falling off. 3/4 pound in weight. And remember, there are 2 or 3 of these, maybe 4 or 5 on a truss. That's a lot of weight on one truss to be supported. So we need to give them a hand. And this is my eureka moment. Now I'm guessing that just over 12 months ago, nobody had any of these indoors. Why would you want them? And then COVID came, didn't it? So face mask. How about this? Oh, I don't know that this will work. And I've just thought about it, so I'm showing you it on the hoof. You saw it first at Homegrown Veg. Hey! Well, what if we hung some of these off the tomato plants? Would that support those tomatoes? I think it would. I mean, there may be other uses in the garden as well, but I'm thinking that at least in the greenhouse we can keep them dry. Perhaps in the garden, if it rained, they would get wet and they might fall to pieces. I don't know. But is this worth a shot? Are you going to give it a go? Remember where you saw it first. Homegrown Veg. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope, if nothing else, that put a smile on your face. This is Homegrown Veg, signing out.